All right, ready to dive into some seriously deep stuff today.
Oh, yeah.
You bet. You brought us this excerpt on Aristotle's political theory from, get this, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Ooh, heavy stuff.
No kidding. It's pretty fascinating, though.
It really is. You know, it's amazing how relevant Aristotle's ideas still are, even
Yeah.
after all these centuries.
I mean, talk about a Johnny of a thinker, right? Philosopher, logician, scientist. He did it all.
He really did. A true polymath.
And his work, especially politics, still shapes how we think about government and leadership even today.
Absolutely. In politics, he lays out his vision for, the ideal society, what makes a good leader. And he didn't just want to theorize about it. He really wanted to find practical solutions.
Yeah, he really did. Almost like a scientist.
Exactly. He wanted to give actual guidance to rulers, not just sit in an ivory tower.
Practical philosophy, I like it. So what's the first big idea that jumps out at you from this excerpt?
Well, right away, Aristotle makes it clear that politics isn't just about, power struggles
Right, yeah.
or just keeping things in order. For him, it's all about creating the conditions for human flourishing, what he calls eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia. It's one of those words you hear thrown around, but it's
Yeah.
hard to really grasp.
It's not just happiness, right? It's deeper.
Right.
It's more like living a fulfilling life, reaching your full potential.
Oh, okay, I see. As a human, I mean,
Yeah, like both intellectually and morally.
so politics isn't just about laws and systems then, but about shaping good character, helping people become...
The best versions of themselves.
Exactly.
And for Aristotle, a well-governed city is one where citizens can live ethical, virtuous lives.
So the city itself almost becomes a school for virtue. But then, who gets to be a student in this city school? Like, who did Aristotle even consider a citizen?
That's a great question, and it shows how different his world was from ours.
Yeah, for sure.
He defines a citizen as someone who can participate in making political decisions,
Okay.
like attending assemblies, being on juries, holding office.
Mm-hmm.
Very hands-on.
A lot different from our modern democracies.
Totally.
Yeah, you don't exactly see people clamoring to be on juries these days.
Nope.
Makes you think what it even means to be a truly engaged citizen by Aristotle's standards.
Yeah, it really does. But to get back to the text,
Yeah.
one of the main things Aristotle does in politics is analyze all these different types of constitutions.
Oh, interesting.
He really wants to figure out which forms of government are the best.
The best for what, though?
Well, for promoting this idea of human flourishing that we talked about. So he's not just describing how governments work.
I see.
He's actually evaluating them, judging them based on how well they help people live good lives.
That's a cool way to look at it. So he's looking at both the structure of power and, like, the motivation behind it?
Exactly. He comes up with this six-fold classification of constitutions based on, who's ruling and whether they rule for everyone or just themselves.
Okay, I'm guessing this is where it gets kind of complicated.
Well, it's a system, but it's not that hard to follow once you get the hang of it.
Okay.
He divides these constitutions into two main groups, correct ones and deviant ones.
Correct and deviant. That sounds pretty straightforward.
Right. Correct basically means they aim for the common good.
Got it.
And deviant means they're unjust. The rulers are only serving their own interests.
So it all comes back to motivation again.
Exactly. And within each group, he's got three types.
Oh, okay.
Depending on if it's one person, a few people, or a lot of people in charge. So on the correct side, for instance, you have kingship. That's when a single virtuous person rules for everyone's benefit.
A virtuous king or queen. Sounds pretty idealistic.
It does. And Aristotle himself realized that a true king, someone who actually rules for the common good, is super rare.
I bet. So what are the other two correct constitutions then?
You've got aristocracy, where a few virtuous people hold power.
Okay.
And then polity, where the many govern for the good of all.
Polity. Now that sounds a little closer to what we're used to. Is that like our democracies today?
Well, kinda, but there are some big differences.
Like what?
Polity relies on the idea of a truly virtuous citizenry that was essential for Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the deviant forms, as you can imagine, are basically the opposites of those.
Okay, so tyranny would be like kingship gone bad, right?
Exactly.
One person ruling for their own gain, not the people's.
Then you've got oligarchy, where a small group, usually the rich ones, rule for their own benefit.
Makes sense.
And this might surprise you, democracy.
Wait, what? Democracy's on the deviant list?
You gotta remember, Aristotle was writing about ancient Greece.
True.
Democracy back then often looked more like mob rule.
Oh, I see.
He saw how easily it could turn into the majority just pursuing their own selfish interests.
And not caring about the minority.
Yeah, without any of those checks and balances we're used to today.
So he wasn't necessarily against the people having a say.
No, not at all.
But he was wary of what happens when that power isn't balanced and guided by virtue.
Exactly. He was super concerned about any form of government getting corrupted and straying from the common good.
So out of all six, did Aristotle have a favorite? Was there one he thought was the absolute best? So did Aristotle have a favorite, like a best of the best constitution?
He did. He had this idea of the best constitution, but it's definitely like a best case scenario.
Okay.
Imagine a society where everyone, every single citizen is morally perfect.
Wow.
Everyone shares in governing, everyone owns property. It's like the perfect recipe, he says, for everyone to live a truly excellent life.
It's like a philosopher's dream world.
Right.
Everyone's super wise and virtuous and no one's fighting over who has more stuff. But honestly, isn't that a little too good to be true?
Aristotle knew that. He even says it's probably impossible to actually achieve in real life.
Yeah, humans, right.
Exactly. But I think he's also saying that, hey, we should aim high.
I like that.
Even if we can't reach perfection, we should at least try to build a society where everyone has the chance to, flourish.
Yeah, shoot for the stars and maybe you land on the moon. So what about when you don't have this perfect society, which is, let's face it, pretty much always? Did Aristotle have any advice for us regular folks?
He did. He's got this second best constitution, which is, a little more down to earth. It's
Okay.
what he calls a polity.
Right, polity. We talked about that before. It's like rule by the many for the common good.
Exactly.
But what makes it second best? How's it different from his best constitution?
Well, in this second best polity, it's dominated by a strong middle class.
Interesting. Why the middle class?
Aristotle thought that the middle class were less likely to go to extremes,
Oh,
like the super rich or the very poor.
I see.
They wouldn't be as prone to, forming factions or abusing their power. It's all about that balance.
So the middle class is like the anchor of society, keeping things steady because they're not like super greedy or desperate.
Exactly.
That's pretty insightful.
If you think about it, what Aristotle's really advocating for here is a system where you've got these checks and balances. No one group gets too powerful.
That does sound kind of familiar.
Right.
It's almost like he anticipated some of those key principles of modern democracies.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got the ideal situation, the second best option, and it's all about balance, balance, balance. What else is in politics?
Law and how law deals with change in society. Aristotle thought law was super important.
In what way?
He thought it was like fundamental for keeping order and for encouraging good habits in people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Laws lay down the ground rules, right? So people can live together peacefully and, ethically.
Exactly. But what happens when things change?
Right.
Societies evolve, new problems pop up. So did he think laws should ever be changed?
It's a good question.
He was a little wary of changing them too much too often.
Why's that?
Well, he worried that if the laws were always in flux, people would just start ignoring them.
Yeah. Like, why bother following the rules if they're just going to change tomorrow?
Exactly. But at the same time, he knew that laws do need to adapt, right?
So how do you balance that need for stability with the need for laws to stay relevant?
It's a tough question, and one that we're still dealing with today. Think about those debates over changing the Constitution.
Right.
Or like trying to update our legal systems that would, reflects new technologies and...
Yeah, new social norms and all that.
Exactly.
It really is like that old saying, the only constant is change. Aristotle was spot on about that one. So laws are important, but they also need to be flexible. What about leadership? What did he say about who should be in charge?
This is where his idea of the statesman comes into play. For Aristotle, a good leader isn't just someone who's ambitious or...
Charismatic.
Right. They need practical wisdom phronesis.
Phronesis. Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
It's like the ability to make good judgments in real-life situations, being able to take general principles and apply them skillful to specific cases. It's the art of making good decisions, basically.
So more than just book smarts.
Way more. You need experience. You need to be able to, balance different values.
It sounds like you need a deep understanding of human nature.
Absolutely. And of different forms of government.
Yeah, and you need to be able to kind of predict what's going to happen because of your decisions.
Exactly. Think about the big picture, adapt to change, and always, always keep the common good in mind.
Wow, that's a lot to ask.
It is.
No wonder Aristotle saw politics as the most authoritative science.
Yeah.
There's dealing with some of the biggest questions about how we live together.
It really is. And it's not just theory for him. He really wanted his ideas to make a difference, to actually guide those in power.
So speaking of guidance, let's go back to that best constitution we were talking about. Is it just this, utopian dream? Or did Aristotle actually say anything specific about how it would work?
Oh, he gets into the details.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, especially in books 7 and 8 of
Oh,
Politics.
wow.
And that's where it gets super interesting. He basically pictures a society where everyone has access to a good education
Okay.
and everyone has enough resources so that they can live a really good life.
Universal education and no poverty.
Yeah, it's ambitious, but remember, it's his ideal scenario.
Right, of course.
He's saying, what if we had all the right conditions? That's what he's exploring here.
Okay, color me intrigued. What would this ideal society actually look like in practice?
Well, education, that's at the very top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle really believed in the power of education to, shape people's character and help them develop virtues.
So no more arguments about school funding or what should be taught. Everyone's on the same page.
Well, in his ideal world, yeah, he saw education as the foundation of a good society.
Makes sense. If everyone's well educated, they can make better choices about how their society is run.
Exactly. And it's not just any kind of education either.
What did he have in mind?
He was a big believer in moral education,
I see.
focusing on those classic virtues, like courage, justice, temperance.
Right.
He thought those qualities were essential for being a good citizen.
So it's not just about, filling your head with facts.
No.
It's about developing your character.
Exactly. It's like that saying, intelligence without wisdom is dangerous.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. So for Aristotle, true education, it should nurture both your mind and your heart.
This is making me see how all the different parts of Aristotle's political theory fit together.
Yeah,
It's not just random ideas, it's all connected.
it is.
It all comes back to this idea of, living a good life and creating a just society.
Right. He's trying to understand those fundamental principles of human society
Yeah.
and how we can use them to build a better world.
It's definitely making me rethink some of my own ideas about politics. Okay, so we've got education as a key ingredient. What else is essential for this best constitution?
Here's something that might surprise you. Private property.
Really? I thought it'd be all about, communal living and shared ownership.
He actually critiques those ideas quite a bit.
Huh. Interesting.
He thought private property was essential for a few reasons.
Okay, lay it on me. Why was private property so important to him?
Well, first of all, he thought it encourages people to be responsible.
Oh, I see.
When you own something, you're more likely to take good care of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You invest in it, you use it wisely.
It's like if everyone's responsible for something, then no one's really responsible for it.
Exactly. And you know what else? He actually thought private property could actually make people more generous.
More generous. How so?
Well, he argued that if people have their own resources, they're more likely to share,
Huh.
they're more likely to give to charity or help people in need.
So it's not just about looking out for number one. He saw it as a way to, contribute to the greater good.
Right. And he also thought that private property helps reduce conflict.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
When people own their stuff, they're less likely to be envious of other people.
If everything's shared, there's more potential for arguments and resentment and all that, right?
Exactly. Plus, he saw private property as crucial for freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah, because if you depend on the state or the community for everything, you lose some of your independence.
That's a really good point. If you can't control your own stuff, you're not really free.
You got it. To be truly free, according to Aristotle, you need some level of material independence.
So let me get this straight. Aristotle's best constitution is about a society where everyone's virtuous, well-educated, and owns property.
Yeah.
It's all about giving people the best shot at reaching their full potential and contributing to the common good, right?
That's it. Of course, even in this ideal society, you still need some form of government.
Oh, right, of course. You need laws and courts and people to defend the city and all that.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of aristocracy comes back in.
Didn't we already talk about aristocracy?
We did, but remember, for Aristotle, aristocracy doesn't mean rule by the rich or the well-connected. It means rule by the best. People who are both morally and intellectually excellent.
Oh, I see. So it's about choosing leaders based on their character and wisdom, not just because of their family name or how much money they have.
Exactly. And because they're virtuous, these leaders will make decisions that are good for everyone.
It's a pretty inspiring vision, even if it feels, a little far-fetched. But I guess that's the point of political philosophy, to think about what's possible, even if it seems impossible.
Exactly. It's about pushing the boundaries of our imagination and envisioning a better world.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, you mentioned earlier that Aristotle disagreed with some of Plato's ideas. What were those disagreements about?
Well, one big one was Plato's idea of abolishing private property and family.
Oh yeah, that whole sharing wives and children thing.
Yeah, exactly. Aristotle thought that was a terrible idea.
He did?
He said it goes against human nature and would cause all sorts of problems.
What kind of problems?
Practical problems, for one. But he also thought it would make people less motivated to work and contribute to society.
So not only impractical, but also harmful to human flourishing?
Right. He thought people are naturally attached to their possessions and their families.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you try to suppress those instincts, it'll backfire.
It's so interesting how their different views on human nature really shaped their whole approach to politics.
It's the foundation. If you don't understand human nature, you can't really come up with a good political theory, according to Aristotle.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to explore with Aristotle.
For sure.
He wrote so much, and his work is just full of these amazing insights that are still relevant today.
I'm definitely looking at the world differently now,
Yeah.
thinking about politics and society in a whole new light.
That's what I love about these kinds of discussions.
Me too.
They really challenge our perspectives and help us see things from different angles.
So as we wrap up part 2 of this deep dive, what are some of the key things we've learned about Aristotle's political theory?
Well, we've seen how, for him, politics isn't about power trips.
Right.
It's about making it possible for everyone to thrive, helping people live good, ethical lives.
And he believed that the best way to achieve this was through a well-designed constitution that balances everyone's interests and promotes the common good.
Exactly. And we talked about how he classifies those different types of constitution.
Right, their pluses and minuses.
He offered us both a dream scenario, the best constitution, and then a more realistic option, the second best.
Yeah, because let's be real, nobody's perfect.
Exactly. And we can't forget about how important he thought law and education and private property were. He saw all those things as essential for a just and flourishing society.
And that constant search for balance that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Finding that sweet spot between individual freedom and social responsibility, between stability and change, between idealism and practicality.
It's a reminder that good politics, it usually involves compromise and careful consideration of different viewpoints.
I feel like I need some time to digest all this.
It's a lot to take in.
Aristotle was really a brilliant thinker.
He was.
Okay, well, on that note, let's move on to part 3, where we'll continue exploring these fascinating ideas. Okay, we're back, ready to finish up our deep dive into Aristotle's political theory.
It has been quite a journey.
Yeah, no kidding. We've covered, so much everything from the purpose of politics to different types of constitutions. We talked about law, education, private property, you name it. But the biggest takeaway for me, I think, is just how much Aristotle focused on human flourishing.
It's really central to his whole philosophy, that idea that, the ultimate goal of politics is to create a society where everyone can live a good life.
Right, to actually reach their full potential.
It really gets you thinking about what government is actually for.
It does.
What kind of world are we even trying to create here?
It's making me think about some of those big debates we're having today.
Oh, yeah.
About income inequality, about education, even about, how technology is shaping our lives. Are these things actually helping us flourish? Or are they holding us back?
Those are the exact kind of questions Aristotle would want us to ask.
I think so, too.
He might not have all the answers for our modern world, but his ideas about politics and ethics, they can really help us grapple with these issues.
One thing that really struck me was that idea of a mixed constitution.
Yeah, the one that combines elements of democracy, oligarchy, and aristocracy.
Right. It's like he realized that no single system is perfect.
Exactly.
So the best approach is to find some kind of balance, right? Take the best parts of each.
And minimize the downsides.
Yeah.
It's really a brilliant insight.
It makes me think about how a lot of modern democracies are actually kind of striving for that kind of mixed system, right?
Yeah, with our checks and sciences, our representative governments,
Right.
our focus on individual rights.
It's all about finding that sweet spot where
you give people a voice,
yeah.
but you also prevent any one group from having too much power.
And you make sure the common good is always front and center.
Right.
It's definitely a balancing act.
It is, but that's what makes Aristotle's ideas so powerful. He understood that politics is messy.
For sure.
Humans were not perfect, and finding the right path forward always takes a lot of work.
Lots of debate.
Lots of compromise.
And being willing to adapt when things change.
Exactly, and that's why we need virtuous leaders.
That's right. People with that practical wisdom you were talking about.
Phronesis.
It's more than just smarts. It's about having that moral compass.
Yeah, and the experience to make good judgments even when things are uncertain.
Man, listening to all this makes me feel both wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And also wow, we have a lot of responsibility to actually live up to these ideas.
It's true. Aristotle's work is definitely a gift.
It is.
It's full of wisdom, but it's not enough to just, admire it.
Right.
We got to actually engage with it, try to put it into practice.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Aristotle's political theory, here's a final thought for you, dear listener.
Okay.
Think about everything we've learned from Aristotle and ask yourself, What kind of constitution do you think would be best for our society today? What kind of leaders do we need? And what can you do to help create a world where everyone has a chance to flourish?
Those are big questions.
They are, but
Important ones.
exactly. We're all political animals, right? At least that's what Aristotle said.
He did.
So we have to, think critically about the kind of world we want to live in and actually do something to make it happen.
Well said. It's been great exploring these ideas with you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep on learning.